to there. I carefully paid attention to the previous speakers, and I can tell you that as much as I like what they said, and as much as I enjoyed the entertaining yet profound advice, I'm afraid that I cannot agree with them. I mean, as much as I want to believe what they say, I just can't. And let me explain to you why. March 9th, 2022, a few months ago, I was invited to one of my professors in my school, asked me, can you come and give a lecture in my class? And I said, yeah, of course. I reluctantly said, yeah, I will come and give it. And we decided, okay, but when? I said, I don't know. It was a randomly picked a date. And we said, okay, it's going to be on on March 9th. And I said, okay, so I was there from 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Everything was agreed, okay. I was a little bit late, so I said, okay, can I come a little bit late because something happened? And then I come around 3 o'clock. It was from 1 to 5. And then I started talking, and was everything okay? And everybody was very happy. We had like a lot of discussion, and it was supposed to finish at 5 o'clock, but the question went on beyond that time. So then, all of a sudden, we got a message from the school, and we said, don't go anywhere, stay put, because we have a case of coronavirus in the school. So, basically, it was a random choice, right? We didn't have to come that day, I didn't have to be there that time, I didn't have to be that, late. I was doomed. And I was thinking like, why did I have to be there? I mean, it could be any time. It just happened to be that. So I was like devastated. And I was thinking to myself like a new Oedipus, that the more I was trying to avoid being there, the closer I got into the mouth of the wolf. So, it was about 5 days that we're locked in the school. We cannot get out. I can tell you that my original assessment was completely wrong. I can tell you with a great degree of certainty that it was the best time I ever had in my whole life. My friend Filippo was there. My friend Saverio was there. We had tons of snacks and food. We stayed together and had conversations all night about very interesting things. We played games in the school. We had jokes. So I realized that I didn't know what to do. I was upset and I was not upset. I wanted to be there and I didn't want to be there. It was like a coin that's flipping in the air, and I couldn't choose which side I wanted to be on. April 1st, 2022. Everybody knows this day. It was the day that the lockdown started, right? So it's about 2 months that we're stuck in our homes, and the opinions are diverse. Some think that it was a very bad experience, and some think it was a very good experience. I'm in between. I cannot decide which one it is. Was it good or was it bad? But one thing I can tell you is that it was worth living that experience. During that time, we had multiple things. The most important part of that experience was the uncertainty. You did not know what's going to happen. But that actually, uncertainty, was a source of invention. We were able to do many, many things that we never thought were possible to do. For example, we would cook all kinds of foods. We would make food from things that we didn't know that it's possible to make food. We would actually do things that would be very interesting. And the most important thing of all is that we realized that we should not complain about anything because we can actually do anything we want. The thing that we also was experiencing was this idea that we didn't know what's going to happen the next day. We didn't know when the lockdown was going to finish. We had no idea what it was. But we realized at some point that the last moment, when everything was running out of food, we would just get it. It would just come like as a salvation to us. And then I started realizing that maybe I was wrong all of my life. Maybe I don't control things. Maybe things control me. And I don't need that. I don't mean that in the, for example, my wife keeps telling me all the time that you don't choose the house that you live. The house chooses you. Well, so I was like always laughing about it. What do you mean by that? I mean, I choose, right? No, she says, if the house doesn't want you, you're not going to get it. She told me that making bread, which is another experience that I had, is like a baby. It relaxes, it sleeps, it's thirsty, it grows. I was like, that's correct. She told me that potatoes and onions are not friends, they're enemies. And as I was thinking about these things, that as primitive as they sound and childish, there is an internal logic to it. And the logic is that there is something in the passive voice that we use that distances us from the things around us. And that the things around us really are the reason why we are who we are. So we shouldn't diminish the potatoes because maybe those are the ones that makes us who we are. So a strange thought came to me. What if things have a mind of their own? And I don't mean that in the superficial Disney Toy Story thing, but in a very, very profound way. In other words, what if ideas are not invented by us, but we are just discovering them? What do I mean by that? Random things. Do you think we invented randomness? Or we are living because of random events? Do you think that we are the ones who discovered geometry? Sorry, we invented geometry? No, it's something we discovered. What about permutation? What about rules? Do we actually make the rules, or we just follow the rules? Think about it. So, in the infinite time that I had during this lockdown, I had the chance to watch the televised defamation trial of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Apart from the amazing amount of gossiping, which was ample, I can tell you, one thing was of great interest to me. Both of these parties in the trial case are actors, right? And actually very good actors. In fact, they're world renowned. And the problem about an actor is that an actor is good when they can pretend something that is not necessarily true. The better an actor is, the more they can show you and convince you about something that is not necessarily true. Which is okay, but this is a trial case. And we're trying to find the truth. So how are we going to find the truth when both of these two actors are competing in how to make a lie true or a true lie? So we go to the second stage of the trial, which is the evidence, the witnesses. But that's not reliable either because, as you can see, they all have opinions which are based on these guys who actually are able to manipulate them. So that's not easy to get. So we go to the hardcore evidence, right? Which is what the trial is all about, right? You get the evidence and you find it. But that's even not is that reliable either because a lot of them can be changed, altered. There's many deep fakes. There's many alterations of the reality as we know it. We already know that is happening. So I realized at some point that the whole trial is not really a trial. I mean, it looks like a trial, but it's not a trial. I mean, it is and it's not a trial at the same time. The problem is that humans have arrived at a point in history that they're unreliable. We are all unreliable. Nobody of us is able to tell the truth the way it is because most of us don't even know what the truth is. So we're all actors. And the evidence that we have is also not enough. So how do we find the truth? Where do we find the truth? And the answer to me is maybe in the other side, in the potatoes, in the bread, in the house. Maybe that's where the truth is. Maybe the artificial is the one who actually, given that it doesn't have any subjectivity, could be able to be the true arbitrators of truth. And that is where the thing is starting to make some sense. So I decided to take this idea that maybe things have a mind of their own and test it, okay, to prove it. So I did 2 experiments for you. The first experiment was based on a movie that I saw. True stories, David Byrne, a long time ago. Very interesting story. But what is more interesting to me was at the end of the movie, okay, when the credits go on and everything is over, this is the last scene of the movie, the last frame of the movie, and I noticed something very, very strange. At the bottom of the screen, I don't know if you can see it well, it says something, there's a phrase, that one over there. And it says, if you can think of it, it exists somewhere. And I was thinking, like, that's a very strange thing to say. It's a very, very profound statement, because it says that we make things happen. Like we said earlier, we are the ones who are the arbitrators of the existence of things. That's a very, very profound statement to make. But it bothered me for a long time. And I was trying to think, why is it bothering me? What is the story behind it? So I thought, okay, I like this statement. It's an interesting statement. So what if I take the words in the statement and I reshuffle them around and see if I can get another statement that is also interesting but different from the original one. So I put them into placeholders, and I made all the possible combinations you can do. I mean, I'm a computer scientist, so 8 million, that's 8 to the power of 8 with 16,777,216 all possible sentences. And I put them around and around, and I got sentences, right? 99% of which is silly. They don't make any sense because they're not syntactically correct. Right? 60 million, this is nothing. It's all the way to pushing. The problem is that I cannot really read them all. It's too many. So I need to find a different way. So what I did is, instead of me looking at it, I trained a system that actually is a copy of me. I trained it to think like me, which is what we call a neural network. Okay? And I had it go through all these sentences in a few seconds, basically, and come up with the sentences that make sense. And I got these over here. If you can think of it, it exists, you can think of it. But the last one was a very interesting one. If it can think of you, you exist. Now that's a very interesting statement, because that's exactly the opposite of what David Byrne said earlier, right? If you can think of it, it exists. This is the exact opposite. It's a very interesting statement because it reverses the whole system of thought. It doesn't tell you that you are the one who makes the world happen. It says that you happen because these things make you who you are. It's a very interesting statement, and I think it was much more profound than the one that I had found in that little story, okay? Now, I'm a computer scientist, so I said, okay, maybe this is a fake sentence because I actually made it. I wrote the program, right? And here's the actual program. You can read it, and if you have a chance, you can actually go through line by line and find it. So I went every line to see whether or not I put something subjective in it, which will actually make me the author of the statement, right? Because if I made a statement somewhere, a subjective move means that I have put myself into there, so therefore it's not on its own. And I went through, again, my previous arguments. I saw there's random, there's geometry, permutation, data, rules, syntax, sentence, nothing of which is my personal opinion. But again, even if you don't believe my statement, you don't know how to read code, I can tell you something else. What if I took these little words and I just blow air and they fall into the floor? Is it possible to make that sentence? Of course, because you just saw there is a sentence. So it's not me who made the sentence. It is it who made the sentence. And the question is, who is the it? Who is the author of this? Because it's not me. Do you know? Because I don't know who this author of this statement is. The most profound statement that I've ever encountered in my whole life. Experiment number 2. In the infinite time that I had the chance again to reread my favorite story, which is the Garcia Marquez novel, Love in His Time of Cholera. And if you haven't seen it, there is a movie on it, and there is also a book. And it's a very interesting story. It's basically an Abyssinian triangle. It's a love story between 2 men and a woman. And actually, in brief, I will tell you that it was basically a woman who actually fell in love when she was young with Florentino, the guy on the right. And then her father didn't want her to be with him, so she took her away in another city, and she married a doctor, Urbino, and stayed married for 50 years. And when he died, they got back together, and they lived their life. This is a very interesting story, and it's very nice to see it and read it the way it is, but if you look a bit deeper, you'll find that it's not really that complicated. It's a very simple story of 2 men and a woman, and the connection between the two and a period of time between them, which is the 50 years, okay? So, I decided, what if I take a series of particles and I run them randomly? So as they're running, they are producing little connections, okay? Relationships, connections, strange connections, and I go through the connections, and I found that there was one of them that actually was very similar to the story that you just saw, the Marquez story. So I said to myself, well, if I can see the particles behaving in a human, in quotes, way, maybe I can find alternative stories. Maybe I can find answers to questions that I have from the original story. Maybe I can find things that happen in the story that are not connected with the story, but they're before what happened, or what happened after the story, the sequel of the story. Because the particles, again, don't take me wrong, the particles have nothing to do with love and emotions and intentions or anything. They're just moving around randomly in space. But somehow they simulate the same story that was in the mind of Marquez. And that's a very interesting thing to me, because all of a sudden, I have a simulation of a mind, of a story. And that way, I'm able to go not only into the story itself, but I can go into things that are going beyond the story, such as what happened to the heroes at the end of the story, after they met. What's the next stage? What happened before it started? So, there's something called the Turing test. I have to make sure to you to understand here that we don't care about the intentions of people. We don't care what you think. What we care is what you do at the end, okay? The result is what matters, okay? So if whether you have feelings, interest, intentions, or whatever, it's irrelevant today. Why? Because a computer can simulate the same thing without knowing whether it is not human or not, okay? Something could be accidental, it could be intentional, or it could be computerized. And yet, you will never be able to know who is behind it. So therefore, we do not care about human feelings. We care about the resulting situations. The Turing test, I hate to tell you, my friends, has long passed, long time ago. There's no such thing as we against them. We are the same. I'd like to finish with one final analogy, a strange analogy. It's called the Russian roulette. No pun intended. You know, they say that guns don't kill. people kill. Guns are just instruments that we use, and some people use them in the wrong way. That's not the case in the Russian roulette. In the Russian roulette, you don't have an opponent. The only thing you have is luck and yourself, none of which you control. It looks like a game, but it's not a game. It looks like an opponent, but it's not an opponent. And it looks like a tool, but it's not a tool. So, dare to think twice next time you pull the trigger.